The Las Vegas Hilton showroom pulsed with a vibrant, almost tangible energy. It was late in the evening, the air thick with anticipation, the scent of expensive perfume and cheap cologne mingling with the stale tang of cigarettes. Hundreds of eyes, glittering with excitement, were fixed on the stage. This wasn't just any night. This was an Elvis Presley night. The house lights dimmed, plunging the room into a velvet darkness. Collective gasp rippled through the audience, followed by a wave of hushed murmurs. Then, the first majestic notes of Richard Strauss's Also Sprach Zarathustra, the iconic theme from 2001. A space odyssey boomed through the speakers. Tension in the room ratcheted up taut as a guitar string. From the wings, a figure emerged, bathed in the blinding glare of a single spotlight. He was a vision in white, his famous jumpsuit studded with shimmering rhinestones, catching the light like 1,000 tiny stars. Collar was high, his cape flowed behind him, adding to his kingly aura. The crowd erupted. A deafening roar, a torrent of screams, applause, and whistles washed over the stage. He moved with that unmistakable swagger, one hand raised in a casual, regal wave, a warm, genuine smile gracing his lips. Elvis Presley had arrived. He moved to the center microphone, his presence filling every corner of the vast showroom. He gave a slight nod to his band, the TCB Band, his musical family. They were the best in the business, a precision machine, sharp and responsive to his every cue. James Burton, the legendary guitarist, stood ready, his fingers hovering over the fretboard of his Telecaster. Jerry Scheff, the stoic bass player, had his eyes fixed on Elvis, ready for the rhythm. Ronnie Tutt, the powerhouse drummer, gripped his sticks, a picture of focused intensity. And at the grand piano, Glen D Hardin, usually a picture of calm professionalism, adjusted his seat. A small bead of sweat trickling down his temple beneath the stage lights. The plan was simple, yet effective. They would open with CC Rider, a guaranteed crowd pleaser, a high-energy blues rocker that always got the audience on their feet, clapping and singing along. It was a staple, a perfect way to ignite the night. Elvis had just reached the microphone, his lips parted slightly, ready to deliver the opening line, while CC Rider Glen D Hardin brought his hands down onto the keys. But the sound that filled the showroom wasn't the familiar driving rhythm of CC Rider. It was something else entirely. It was the soft, lilting, utterly unmistakable arpeggio of Can't Help Falling in Love. A ballad, a slow, romantic, tender ballad. And the band was about to launch into it as the opening number of a high-octane Vegas show. For a split second, an almost imperceptible ripple went through the band. James Burton's eyebrows shot up. Ronnie Tutt, midair with his drumsticks, froze, his eyes wide, looking at Glen D as if he'd just seen a ghost. Jerry Scheff's fingers paused over his bass strings. The sweet inspirations. Elvis's backing vocalists exchanged bewildered glances. Their faces, usually composed, now wore expressions of pure shock, and too picked up on it a few scattered whispers, a confusion. Was that? Did they? They knew this song, of course. Everyone knew Can't Help Falling in Love. It was one of Elvis's most beloved hits, often reserved for a tender moment in the show, maybe near the end when he tossed scarves to adoring fans, but never as the explosive opening number. Elvis was just raising the microphone to his lips. He heard the notes. His eyes, for just a fraction of a second, widened, a flash of pure surprise. He didn't flinch, he didn't scowl, he didn't look back at Glen D with anger. Instead, a slow, almost imperceptible smile began to spread across his face, starting at the corners of his mouth and reaching his eyes. It wasn't a forced smile or a panicked one. It was a knowing, mischievous smile, almost like a secret had just been shared between him and the universe. He took a deep breath, the soft piano notes of Can't Help Falling in Love filling the room. Waiting expectantly, He looked out at the sea of faces, his gaze sweeping over them, then back to his band, a silent, confident signal. The band members, still slightly stunned, watched him, waiting. What would he do? Stop the song, correct them, walk off stage? No, Elvis brought the microphone closer, his hand firm. His eyes sparkled. He leaned in a flicker of pure showmanship, lighting up his features. He didn't sing the lyrics to "Can't Help Falling in Love." He opened his mouth, and a rich, powerful voice, slightly lower than usual, almost a hum, began to weave itself into the unexpected melody. It wasn't CC Rider. It wasn't even the words to the current song. It was something entirely new, something completely unexpected. The king was about to create a moment that no one, not even his own band, would ever forget. Piano chords of "Can't Help Falling in Love," humming the air, a beautiful if completely out of place. Opening for the high-energy show, Glen D Hardin's face was a mask of mortification. He kept playing, because what else could he do? Stop. That would be an even bigger disaster. But his fingers trembled slightly on the keys. He braced himself for Elvis's reaction. For the moment the king would stop the music, perhaps even scold him right there on stage. But Elvis didn't scold. He didn't stop. He didn't even look annoyed. His smile, that surprising, mischievous smile, only deepened his eyes, usually intensely focused, held a playful spark. He let the first few bars of the melody play out, allowing the audience and the band to fully register the mistake. It was a bold move, a silent acknowledgement that, yes, something was off, but no, it wasn't a problem. Not for him then. Elvis leaned into the microphone. Instead of the gentle, familiar opening lines of "Wise Men Say," he hummed, a low, rich, wordless hum that perfectly blended with the melody. Glen D was playing. It wasn't just a hum. It was a pure, melodic sound, full of a surprising depth. It was the hum of a man who loved music, who understood its flow, who knew how to bend it to his will. Ronnie Tutt, ever the professional, saw the hum. He saw the smile. He saw the fire in Elvis's eyes. Ronnie, who had played with Elvis for years, knew that look. It wasn't panic. It was creativity. It was the look of a man who was about to turn a stumble into a dance. Quickly adjusted his grip on his drumsticks, his mind racing. "Can't Help Falling in Love" was a slow 6/8 time signature. CC Rider was a driving 4/4. His muscle memory screamed 4/4. But his eyes told him 6/8. Took a breath and with a subtle shift gently brought in the brushes. A soft, delicate beat, perfectly complementing the ballad. No crashes, no heavy rock beats, just a whisper of rhythm. James Burton, guitar god that he was, watched Elvis with a mixture of awe and bewilderment. He had been ready to launch into his signature sharp, electric riffs for CC Rider. Now he had to completely rethink. He saw Ronnie's quick adaptation. James knew that if Elvis was rolling with it, he had to, too. Myrna Smith, the group's leader, caught Elvis's eye. He gave them a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was a signal not for specific lyrics, but for general support. They understood. They began to hum softly, harmonizing with Elvis, their voices blending into a warm, angelic background, adding a layer of depth and emotion to the unexpected ballad. They were a safety net, a wall of sound that could cushion any vocal improvisation. The audience, initially confused, began to process what was happening. This wasn't a mistake that was being corrected. This was a mistake that was being embraced. A wave of murmurs rippled through the showroom again, but this time they were different. Not confused, but intrigued. "He's going with it," someone whispered loudly. "Look at him. He's just singing." Elvis's voice, still humming, began to transition. The melody of "Can't Help Falling in Love" was still there, but subtly, almost imperceptibly, his humming started to hint at another tune. It was fleeting like a ghost of a melody, but enough for the band to pick up on. Glen D Hardin, his initial terror fading into a strange exhilaration, suddenly found himself listening intently, trying to decipher Elvis's subtle cues. Elvis then, still with that confident, almost joyful expression, took a half-step back from the mic, his eyes scanning the band. He made a small, almost imperceptible hand gesture towards James Burton. It was a gesture for something. James, quick on the uptake, caught it. Elvis wanted to transition. He wanted to keep the flow going, but where? It shifted slightly from the gentle ballad into something with a touch more blues, a hint of gospel. He wasn't singing words, but the shape of the notes, the soulful phrasing, gave them a clue. It was a masterclass in nonverbal communication, a testament to years of playing together. Then, just as the audience started to truly lean in, wondering what miracle was unfolding before their eyes, Elvis's humming faded for a moment. He stepped back to the mic and in a smooth, effortless transition he spoke, his voice clear and resonant, a slight chuckle in his tone. "Well," he said, "guess we're just gonna roll with it tonight, folks. Hope you like surprises." Cheer erupted from the crowd, a mix of delight and admiration. They loved him for this. They loved his spontaneity, his human touch. They loved that he wasn't perfect, but he was real. And as the cheer faded, Elvis turned back to the microphone, his eyes shining. The subtle hum started again, but this time it was unmistakably leading into the opening notes of a different song. Piano notes from Glen D began to shift tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Following Elvis's lead, the medley had truly begun. The energy in the showroom had shifted dramatically. What started as confusion had morphed into an electric buzz of anticipation. The audience wasn't just watching a concert anymore. They were witnessing a unique, unrepeatable moment in time, a spontaneous act of musical creation. Elvis's calm, confident humor about the surprise had instantly put everyone at ease, turning a potential disaster into an intriguing adventure. Glen D Hardin, his initial panic completely gone, felt a surge of exhilaration. He was no longer just playing a song. He was actively participating in a live musical conversation with Elvis, trying to anticipate his next move, to follow the King's improvisational lead. Elvis's humming, his subtle head movements, the almost imperceptible changes in his stance, these were his signals. The humming from Elvis deepened, becoming more structured. It had shed the last remnants of "Can't Help Falling in Love," and now soared, clear and soulful. It was a different song, a familiar melody, but not one usually pulled out for a high-octane Vegas show. Glen D recognized it first. It was the beautiful, yearning melody of "Fever." His fingers, already warmed up from the ballad, smoothly transitioned. The gentle, romantic chords of "Can't Help Falling in Love," Mickey melted into the sultry, menaced rhythm of "Fever." He played it soft, setting the mood. Ronnie Tutt picked up on it instantly. "Fever" was a completely different, feel a slinky, almost jazzy tempo. He ditched the brushes for sticks but kept his touch light, emphasizing the rim shots and the quiet shuffle of the hi-hat, building that classic simmering tension that the song required. He watched Elvis, ready for any shift in tempo or intensity. James Burton, meanwhile, was having the time of his life. He wasn't constrained by the rigid structure of a set list. Picked up on Glen D's transition and started laying down a sparse, boozy guitar line. Just a few notes here and there, letting the space breeze. He started with a low, almost spoken word. "You give me fever." His voice a seductive rumble, testing the waters. Then he shifted, weaving in fragments of lyrics from other songs that held a similar emotional weight. Lines about burning love, about passionate desire, creating a mosaic of longing and heat. It was brilliant. He was telling a story, but not in a linear way. He was using fragments of emotion connected by the theme of the new song. The sweet inspirations followed their harmonies, now richer, more textured, adding to the sultry mood. They knew "Fever" well, of course, but the way Elvis was interpreting it, blending it with other snippets, was new. They were truly improvising, listening to his every vocal nuance, anticipating where he might lead them next. The audience was captivated. You could feel their attention, a collective leaning forward. They recognized Fever now, but the way he was delivering it with these unexpected lyrical twists was mesmerizing. Cheers and shouts of approval erupted when he hit a particularly soaring note or a perfectly placed bluesy inflection. This was Elvis truly performing, truly creating in the moment. He let the first verse and chorus of Fever play out, establishing the mood, building the tension. Then, just as the audience settled into the groove, Elvis, with a subtle movement of his hand, signaled to Glen D and James Burton for a change. It was quick, precise, and yet almost invisible to the audience. Glen D saw it as shift in tempo, a slight lift in the melody. James felt it too. A nudge towards something a little more upbeat, a little more soulful. Without missing a beat, still humming softly, Elvis segued from the simmering Fever into the familiar driving rhythm of Suspicious Minds. The transition was smooth, almost imperceptible to the untrained ear, but Glen D's left hand moved from the jazzy chords of Fever to the powerful rhythmic chords of Suspicious Minds. Ronnie Tutt, who had been holding back, exploded into the song's signature drum beat, a burst of energy that made the audience gasp and then erupt in cheers. James Burton's guitar found its voice, laying down the iconic driving riff, no longer soft and bluesy, but sharp and compelling. The sweet inspirations immediately launched into the powerful backing vocals of Suspicious Minds, their voices soaring, adding to the sudden burst of energy. Contrast was stark, from a smoldering ballad to an explosive rock anthem, all within the span of a few seconds, led by Elvis's instinct and the band's incredible responsiveness. Elvis's voice, now full of the familiar passion of Suspicious Minds, filled the room. He wasn't just singing the words, he was living them, his body swaying, his hips moving, his hands gesturing with intensity. He was totally immersed, completely lost in the moment, guiding his band and his audience through an unpredictable, exhilarating musical journey. The entire showroom was on its feet, swept up in the magic. This was more than just a concert. It was an act of pure, unadulterated artistry, born from a single beautiful mistake. Transition into Suspicious Minds was a revelation, not just for the audience, but for the band itself. The initial shock and anxiety had completely evaporated, replaced by an intoxicating sense of creative freedom. They weren't just following a set list anymore. They were co-conspirators in a grand, spontaneous experiment. Glen D Hardin, who had initiated the whole thing with his accidental piano intro, felt a wild joy bubbling up inside him. He was no longer worried about making a mistake. He was focused entirely on listening to Elvis, on feeling the flow of the music. His hands danced across the keys, moving from the driving chords of Suspicious Minds into intricate fills, anticipating Elvis's subtle shifts in phrasing and rhythm. He was playing with more passion and intuition than he had in years. Ronnie Tutt, behind his drum kit, was a force of nature. He was laying down the beats with precision and power, but with an added layer of responsiveness. His eyes were constantly on Elvis, picking up every twitch, every lean, every subtle change in vocal delivery. He was the anchor, keeping the rhythm solid while allowing the others to improvise around him. At one point, Elvis leaned into a particularly soulful vocal run, and Ronnie instinctively dropped a quick, unexpected drum roll that perfectly punctuated the moment, eliciting a wide grin from Elvis. James Burton was in his element. This was where he truly shone in the unexpected. In the moment where pure instinct took over, his guitar riffs for Suspicious Minds were already legendary, but tonight he was adding flourishes, little improvisational runs that sparkled and crackled with energy. He was communicating with Elvis through his guitar, responding to every vocal nuance, every flick of the King's wrist. There was a moment when Elvis held a note longer than usual, and James, without a second thought, filled the space with a soaring bluesy bend that sent shivers down the spines of the audience. The sweet inspirations were a symphony of voices, their harmonies layered and rich. They were so tuned into Elvis that they were anticipating his lyrical snippets. If he hinted at a gospel tune, they were already preparing the appropriate chord. If he shifted to a rock and roll anthem, their voices would gain that powerful gritty edge. They moved with him, their choreography almost as fluid as his, their faces alight with the shared thrill of the moment. They were a vocal safety net, ensuring every melody, no matter how brief or unexpected, was beautifully supported. There was a moment midway through what felt like a truly unique version of Suspicious Minds, when Jerry Scheff, the usually unflappable bass player, nearly faltered. He was so engrossed in following Elvis's unpredictable journey that for a split second he lost his place, his fingers hovering over the fretboard. It was barely noticeable, a tiny hesitation. But Elvis, ever aware, ever connected to his musicians, felt it. Without breaking eye contact with the audience, without missing a beat in his singing, Elvis took a casual step back closer to Jerry. He didn't speak, but his eyes met Jerry's for just a flicker. A small, reassuring nod, a silent message. "I got you, you're fine, keep going." Jerry immediately recentered himself. That small personal gesture from Elvis was all he needed. He dug back into the bass line, his playing becoming even more robust, his notes powerful and steady. He felt that familiar surge of loyalty and admiration for Elvis the King, who trusted his band, who embraced their humanity, and who turned every challenge into an opportunity. Communication among the band members became a beautiful dance. Eye contact, head nods, subtle shifts in posture. They were talking without words, anticipating each other, building on each other's contributions. Glen D would play a certain chord progression, and James would immediately pick up on it, weaving a complementary riff. Ronnie would lay down a beat, and the sweet inspirations would instinctively lean into a certain harmony. It was a true collaboration, a testament to their years of shared musical history. Elvis, meanwhile, was glowing. He was clearly enjoying this improvisation more than any rehearsed set. His movements were looser, more fluid. His famous hip gyrations were more spontaneous. His karate kicks more joyful. He wasn't just performing, he was celebrating the unexpected, celebrating the pure joy of making music with people he trusted implicitly. He moved from Suspicious Minds into a brief, powerful snippet of Polk Salad Annie, the band following his lead bay, the bass line heavy and swampy. Then, with a sudden playful wink at the audience, he veered into a few lines of jailhouse rock, complete with classic dance moves, before smoothly bringing it back to a soaring vocal from Suspicious Minds. The sound was phenomenal. This wasn't just Elvis Presley, the superstar. This was Elvis Presley, the musician, the artist, the leader, trusting his instincts and his band together, creating a masterpiece. The band had caught on, and they were riding the wave with him, creating a magic that would be talked about for years to come. From the very first unexpected notes of "Can't Help Falling in Love," the audience had been on a roller coaster of emotions. Initial confusion had quickly turned to intrigue, then to a bubbling excitement. By the time Elvis was smoothly weaving fever into Suspicious Minds, the showroom was a whirlwind of energy, a place where every single person felt a part of something truly special. The murmurs had long since ceased. Now there were gasps of delight, shouts of encouragement, and thunderous applause that punctuated every seamless transition, every unexpected vocal flourish from Elvis. People weren't just sitting in their seats anymore. They were on their feet, swaying, clapping, some even dancing in the aisles. Longtime fans who had seen Elvis countless times were perhaps the most stunned and delighted. They knew his set lists by heart, knew every movement, every planned moment. This was different. This was raw, untamed Elvis. They recognized the fragments of songs he was pulling out, some of them obscure B-sides, others beloved gospel tunes that he rarely performed in his regular shows. It was like he was opening up his personal musical vault, sharing bits and pieces of his entire career, all spontaneously stitched together. "Did you hear that?" a woman in the front row whispered to her husband, tears glistening in her eyes. "He just did a part of Kentucky Rain. I haven't heard him sing that in years." Her husband, equally moved, just shook his head in wonder. A wide smile plastered across his face. The younger members of the audience, perhaps seeing Elvis for the first time, were mesmerized. They had heard the legends, seen the films, but nothing prepared them for this dynamic, improvisational performance. They were witnessing a true master at work, not just singing songs, but creating art on the fly. His charisma was overwhelming, his connection to the music palpable. There was a contagious joy emanating from the stage, and it spread like wildfire through the crowd. Elvis was smiling, truly smiling, a broad, genuine grin that reached his eyes. He looked relaxed, unburdened by the usual pressures of a perfectly executed show. He looked like he was having fun, pure, unadulterated fun, and that feeling resonated with every person in the room. When he segged from the high-energy, suspicious minds into a brief, soulful gospel snippet, a few lines from "How Great Thou Art," a reverent hush fell over the audience. It was a surprising, powerful moment of quiet contemplation amidst the rock and roll frenzy. People stood in awe, some wiping away tears touched by the raw emotion in his voice. Then, just as suddenly, he would twist back into a driving rock song and the energy would explode once more. The rhythm of the medley was unpredictable, a thrilling roller coaster ride. One moment, they were slow dancing to a ballad that Elvis was reinventing. The next, they were jumping and shouting to a classic rock anthem. Each transition was a surprise, a delightful twist that kept everyone on the edge of their seats, wondering what familiar melody he would weave in next. People started calling out requests, not knowing if he would hear them, but hoping to influence his spontaneous journey. "Heartbreak Hotel," one person yelled. "Love Me Tender," another shouted. Elvis, ever the showman, would occasionally glance in the direction of the shouts, a playful glint in his eye, as if acknowledging their suggestions, even if he didn't incorporate them directly. The Las Vegas Hilton showroom, usually a place of polished, predictable entertainment, had transformed into a vibrant, living organism. It felt intimate. Despite the large crowd, it felt like a private jam session shared by thousands. Everyone felt connected, not just to Elvis, but to each other, sharing in this singular, magnificent experience. The energy was palpable. It wasn't just the music, it was the shared understanding of what was happening. It was the thrill of imperfection, of human spontaneity, of seeing a legendary artist stripped bare of pretense, relying purely on talent and instinct. They were witnessing Elvis Presley, the king, proving why he was the king, not through carefully choreographed moves or perfect renditions, but through sheer unadulterated musical genius and a willingness to simply roll with. As Elvis built towards another unexpected crescendo, his voice soaring, the band firing on all cylinders, the audience erupted into a prolonged standing ovation that vibrated through the entire room. They weren't just applauding a performance, they were applauding a moment, a memory, a story that they would tell for years to come. This wasn't just a concert, this was history in the making. Elvis, riding the wave of the audience's exhilaration, and the band's newfound freedom, plunged deeper into the medley. It was no longer a series of accidental transitions. It was a deliberate artistic choice. He was painting a musical landscape, using his vast catalog as his palette. He moved from the driving energy of Suspicious Minds into the raw, powerful blues of That's All Right, Mama, the very first song he ever officially released. The band instantly picked up on the primal rhythm, James Burton unleashing a flurry of blistering guitar licks, Ronnie Tutt laying down a loose shuffle beat. It was a nod to his roots, a tribute to where it all began, and the audience roared its approval, delighted by the unexpected trip down memory lane. Then, with a casual flick of his wrist, Elvis took them somewhere completely different. He slowed the tempo, the bluesy grit melting away, and began to sing the opening lines of Blue Hawaii, a gentle melodic tune from one of his most beloved films. Glen D Hardin shifted to soft island-flavored chords, and the sweet inspirations floated in with their lush tropical harmonies. It was a surprising, almost whimsical detour, shooting a lighter, more romantic side of the king, and the audience swayed gently, lost in the dreamy atmosphere. But Elvis wasn't one to stay still for long. Just as the Blue Hawaii melody settled in, he subtly steered it towards a more reflective, almost melancholic tone. His voice deepened, the island lilt replaced by a soulful lament, hinting at the powerful ballad, In the Ghetto. Glen D's piano chords became somber. Ronnie Tutt's drums quieted to a gentle pulse, and James Burton's guitar wept a few sorrowful notes. The sweet inspirations provided a haunting, mournful backdrop. It was a brief, poignant moment, a stark reminder of his social conscience and his ability to convey deep emotion. The beauty of the medley was its unpredictability, its emotional swings. From the despair of In the Ghetto, Elvis, with a sudden burst of energy, launched into a wild, rollicking version of Burning Love. The entire band exploded with him, every instrument ablaze. Ronnie Tutt hammered his drums with ferocity. James Burton's guitar wailed and soared. Glen D's piano chords were thick and thunderous, and a sweet inspirations unleashed a torrent of powerful, joyful harmonies. Elvis himself was a whirlwind of movement, his famous karate kicks and dynamic hand gestures returning with renewed vigor. He wasn't just singing. He was performing every fiber of his being, eyes wide with exhilaration. The audience was swept up in a frenzy. They clapped, they sang along, they shouted his name. They were witnessing a man completely liberated, shedding the constraints of a pre-planned show. This wasn't a performance. It was a conversation, a musical dialogue between Elvis, his band, and the thousands of adoring fans. At one point, he even threw in a completely unexpected snippet. A quick, playful rendition of Teddy Bear, complete with exaggerated cuddly gestures, much to the audience's delight. It was a nod to his earlier, more innocent days, and it showed his remarkable ability to shift personas from rock icon to romantic lead to playful charmer, all within seconds. He didn't just sing the whole songs. He'd sing a verse, a chorus, maybe a bridge, and then smoothly transition. Sometimes he'd repeat a lyrical phrase from one song over the music of another, creating intriguing new combinations. His voice was incredibly flexible, adapting to each style, each mood with astonishing ease. The band was utterly locked in a testament to their skill and their years of working with Elvis. They anticipated his shifts, not just musically, but emotionally. They knew when to be loud and boisterous, when to be subtle and reflective, when to push the tempo, and when to hold back. It was as if they were reading his mind, translating his spontaneous thoughts into perfectly executed music. Elvis was clearly energized by the audience's reaction. He fed off their excitement, and it fueled his own creativity. He looked genuinely happy, a deep, relaxed joy that seemed to emanate from his very core. He wasn't performing for money or fame tonight. He was performing for the sheer love of music, for the thrill of the moment, for the magic of unexpected creation, and the audience, sensing this, loved him even more for it. The deeper they dove into this amazing medley, the more special and unforgettable the night became. The medley was nearing its peak, a breathtaking showcase of Elvis's incredible range and his band's unparalleled adaptability. After a powerful, extended version of American Treon, where he wove together Dixie, Battle Hymn of the Republic, and All My Trials, building to a soaring, emotional crescendo, a sudden, almost reverent hush fell over the showroom. Elvis had brought the energy down, not abruptly, but gently, like a plane descending softly after a thrilling flight. The music softened to a delicate, almost ambient hum. From the band, Glen D played a simple lingering chord on the piano. Ronnie Tutt's drums faded to a whisper. James Burton's guitar offered only a few mournful sustained notes. Elvis stepped slightly back from the microphone, his chest heaving gently from the exertion of the previous numbers. His face, still glistening with sweat under the stage lights, held an expression of profound contentment. His eyes, usually scanning the crowd for adoring faces, now settled almost thoughtfully on a particular spot in the audience. It was an older woman, perhaps in her late 60s, sitting quietly in the third row. She wasn't screaming or reaching out. She was simply watching him, her eyes shining with unshed tears, a look of pure, unadulterated devotion on her face. Her hands were clasped over her heart, almost as if she was praying. Elvis held her gaze for a moment, a silent connection passing between them. In that brief, intimate exchange, it was as if he was acknowledging every single person in the room, every fan who had stayed with him through thick and thin, through every song, every album, every film. His smile, when it returned, was softer, more vulnerable than before. He then moved slightly closer to the mic again, his voice lower, more conversational, yet still carrying to every corner of the room. "You know," he began, his voice raspy but warm, Sometimes things don't go exactly to plan." A ripple of knowing laughter went through the audience. "And that's okay, isn't it?" he continued, a gentle chuckle in his tone. "'Cause sometimes the best things happen when you just let go, when you just trust." He gestured vaguely towards his band with a sweep of his hand, a look of immense pride on his face. "These fellas," he said, his voice full of genuine affection, "they're more than just musicians. They're family. And tonight they showed me something pretty special. They showed me what trust can do." The band members shifted, some looking down humbly, others beaming at the unexpected public praise. Glen D Hardin, who had started it all, felt a warmth spread through him. Caught Elvis's eye, and Elvis gave him a small conspiratorial wink, a silent acknowledgement of their shared adventure. Elvis turned back to the audience, his gaze sweeping over them once more. "Music," he mused, almost to himself, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Music is a funny thing. It can be rehearsed, perfect, planned down to the note, and that's good. That's important, but sometimes it just needs to breathe. It needs to find its own way. Like tonight." He paused, letting his words hang in the air, letting the emotion sink in. The showroom was utterly silent, captivated by his honesty, by this rare glimpse into the man behind the legend. "And you folks," he said, his voice gaining a touch more power, "you folks just rolled with it too. You didn't give up on us. You didn't walk out. You joined us on this little journey." He spread his hands wide, a gesture of gratitude. "And for that I thank you from the bottom of my heart." A wave of heartfelt applause, even more profound than before, washed over the stage. It wasn't just for his music, it was for his humility, his vulnerability, his connection. It was a moment of true, unvarnished emotion. A shared human experience that transcended the usual performer-audience divide. Took a moment letting the applause wash over him, then nodded to Glen D. The piano picked up a soft, familiar melody, the gentle, melancholic opening to Memories. Elvis began to sing, not with the usual showmanship, but with a quiet, reflective tenderness. Memories pressed between the pages of my mind. His voice was a balm, soothing and poignant. It wasn't about the show or the medley. It was about shared moments, about the power of music to create lasting impressions, to forge connections that went deeper than words. He was singing about this very night, even as it unfolded, cementing it in everyone's hearts and minds as a treasured memory. This was the true heart of the medley, a moment of profound, shared humanity. The reflective mood of Memories gradually began to shift, a slow, almost imperceptible build. Elvis, having connected with the audience on such a personal level, now prepared to bring the medley to its powerful, unforgettable conclusion. His eyes, though still carrying a touch of that earlier vulnerability, now gleamed with renewed energy, a rekindled fire. He let memories gently fade, the last notes hanging in the air like shimmering dust. Then, with a subtle nod to Ronnie Tutt, the drums began to build, not a sudden explosion, but a steady, driving rhythm, a heartbeat that grew stronger with each passing second. It was the familiar, iconic beat of "My Way." The audience gasped collectively. It was perhaps his most powerful, most definitive closing statement, but in the context of this unpredictable medley, it felt even more profound. It was a song about living life, on your own terms, about individuality, about taking risks, and tonight he had truly lived. Elvis launched into the song with a newfound passion, his voice rich and resonant, imbued with all the emotions of the night. He wasn't just singing the lyrics, he was embodying them. And now, the end is near. Glen D Hardin's piano chords were grand and sweeping, providing a majestic foundation. James Burton's guitar sang with a mournful yet powerful melody, adding a layer of soaring intensity. Jerry Scheff's bass line was a deep, unwavering pulse anchoring the entire performance. Ronnie Tutt was a powerhouse, his drums driving the song forward with relentless energy, building to its dramatic crescendos. The sweet inspirations were magnificent, their voices weaving intricate harmonies that swelled and receded, adding operatic layers to the performance. As the song progressed, Elvis began to weave in subtle musical echoes from earlier in the medley. A fleeting bluesy lick from "That's All Right Mama" would appear in James Burton's guitar solo. A delicate, romantic flourish from "Can't Help Falling in Love" would briefly grace Glen D's piano. A hint of the underlying rhythm from "Suspicious Minds" would subtly integrate into Ronnie Tutt's drumming. It was masterful. It wasn't just "My Way" anymore. It was "My Way," the medley version. It was the culmination of every spontaneous twist and turn of the night, bringing it all together into one grand, unified statement. He was demonstrating that even a mistake could be integrated, embraced, and transformed into something beautiful and cohesive. He moved across the stage with deliberate, powerful steps, his cape swirling behind him, his presence magnetic. He engaged with the audience, making eye contact, acknowledging their cheers, feeding off their energy. There was a sense of triumph in his movements, a joy in his performance that transcended the technical perfection of a rehearsed show. When he reached the famous bridge, his voice soared, full of raw emotion and the wisdom of experience. For what is a man? What has he got, if not himself? Then he has not. To say the things he truly feels and not the words of one who kneels. He delivered those lines with unparalleled conviction, his eyes burning with intensity. This wasn't just a song. It was his manifesto given new weight by the unexpected journey of the night. He had spoken his truth, not just through words, but through the spontaneous act of musical creation. Then, for the grand finale, as the orchestra swelled and the drums hammered, Elvis did something truly extraordinary. Just as he was about to hit the final climactic note of "My Way," he subtly, almost magically, wove in the very first unexpected piano notes from the beginning of the show, the opening arpeggio of "Can't Help Falling in Love." Glen D Hardin, following Elvis's subtle vocal cue, had already anticipated. He integrated those soft, iconic notes into the powerful crescendo of "My Way." It was a fleeting yet unmistakable return to the mistake that had started it all. But instead of ending softly, Elvis, with a roar of pure triumph, brought it back full circle to the very first intended song at C. Rider. He didn't sing the full lyrics, but his voice, booming and powerful, launched into a final electrifying rock and roll shout, a powerful primal burst of energy that was unmistakably the essence of C. Rider. The band, a well-oiled machine, once more roared with him, Ronnie Tutt hitting his drums with a final earth-shattering crash, James Burton's guitar wailing in triumph. The sweet inspirations provided a final soaring harmony. The showroom exploded. The applause, the screams, the cheers were unlike anything anyone had ever heard. It wasn't just an ovation. It was a visceral outpouring of emotion, of awe, of shared ecstasy. Elvis stood center stage, his chest heaving, his arms outspread, his face alight with a joyous, triumphant smile. He had taken a wrong turn and created a new masterpiece. He had started a wrong song and ended with a legendary medley that touched every soul in the room. The roar of the crowd was still ringing in Elvis's ears as he walked off stage, his white jumpsuit gleaming under the fading stage lights. His usual entourage was there, ready to usher him through the chaotic backstage area. But tonight, there was an even greater buzz, a palpable sense of exhilaration that transcended the usual post-show high. Elvis was breathing heavily, sweat plastering strands of hair to his forehead, but his eyes were bright, almost sparkling. He wasn't just tired. He was buzzing with an energy he hadn't felt in a long time. It was the energy of pure, unadulterated, creative satisfaction. As he reached his dressing room, members of the TCB band started filtering in. Their faces flushed, their eyes wide with a mixture of relief and disbelief. They were all talking at once, a cacophony of excited chatter. "Elvis, man, that was incredible!" James Burton exclaimed, still clutching his guitar, a huge grin on his face. "I've never seen anything like it. You just went with it." Glen D Hardin, who had been dreading this moment, stood a little apart, nervously wiping his brow. "Elvis," he began, his voice laced with apology. "I am so sorry about the start. I don't know what happened. My mind just—" Elvis, still catching his breath, cut him off with a warm smile and a dismissive wave of his hand. "Glen D," he said, his voice softer than usual, "don't you dare apologize, you hear me?" He walked over to the piano player and clapped him on the shoulder, a firm, reassuring squeeze. "That was the best mistake you ever made, son. Best mistake any of us ever made." Glen D looked up, his eyes widening. A genuine, relieved smile spread across his face. You really think so?" "I know so," Elvis affirmed, his gaze sweeping over the rest of the band members who had gathered around. "All of you. Every single one of you. The way you picked up on it. The way you just rode that wave with me. That's what music is all about, fellas. That's pure magic." Ronnie Tutt, ever the steady presence, just shook his head, a look of profound respect on his face. "You're the king for a reason, boss. Most people would have stopped the show cold. You just made it better." Jerry Chef, who had briefly faltered, nodded in agreement. "I thought my heart was going to stop when Glen D started that. But then you just took off and we had no choice but to follow. It was exhilarating." The sweet inspirations, still in their shimmering gowns, gathered around too. Myrna Smith spoke for them all. "We were just watching you, Elvis. You had that look in your eye, and we knew. We just knew. We had to go wherever you went." Elvis looked at each of them, a deep sense of gratitude and affection in his eyes. He had always valued his band, considered them essential to his sound, but tonight their bond felt even stronger, forged in the crucible of improvisation. They had trusted him implicitly, and he had trusted them. It was a testament to their years of shared history, their unspoken language, and their profound respect for each other's talent. "We created something tonight," Elvis said, his voice quiet but firm. "Something we couldn't have planned. Something that probably won't ever happen again. Not exactly like that." He paused, looking around at the tired but triumphant faces of his musicians. "And that's what makes it special. That's what makes it ours." He raised his hand, and without a word, the band members, understanding the gesture, joined him. Piling their hands together in the center, Elvis squeezed their hands. A silent acknowledgement, their unspoken camaraderie. The usual post-show debriefing felt different. There was no dissection of specific cues or missed notes. It was all about the feeling, the incredible energy they had generated. They were buzzing with stories, reliving moments of quick thinking, of perfect musical intuition. It was clear that this wrong song had become one of the most memorable and beloved performances of their careers, perhaps even their lives. As the band members slowly dispersed, still talking excitedly, Elvis sat down, Still smiling, he felt lighter, more energized than he had in months. Pressure of perfection, which often weighed heavily on him, had been replaced by the exhilaration of spontaneity. He realized that sometimes the greatest art wasn't in the flawless execution of a plan, but in the fearless embrace of the unexpected. Tonight, he hadn't just entertained a crowd. He had rediscovered a piece of himself, a forgotten joy in the pure, unscripted act of making music. The story of the Medley concert, as it quickly became known, spread like wildfire. It wasn't just talk within the Hilton. It became a legendary tale, whispered among fans, recounted in music magazines, and debated by critics. For years to come, people who had been there would proudly proclaim, "I was at the show when Elvis started the wrong song." The official records of the concert night listed the usual set list, but everyone knew the truth. Bootleg recordings, poor in quality but rich in spirit, surfaced among collectors, trotting the raw, unedited brilliance of that spontaneous performance. Fans would listen intently, trying to pick out every transition, every unexpected became a testament to Elvis's genius, his ability to turn any situation into a captivating performance for Elvis himself. The experience was profoundly able. In the days and weeks that followed, he often reflected on that night. Pressure of being the king, of delivering a perfect polished show every single time, had been immense. It sometimes felt like a gilded cage, beautiful but restrictive. That night, when Glen D Hardin hit those wrong notes, something had broken free. He realized the immense power of letting go, of trusting his instincts, of trusting his band. He had seen the pure joy on their faces and on the faces of the audience when he chose not to stop, but to roll with it. There was a unique kind of magic in imperfection, in the raw human response to the unexpected. The Medley concert became a personal touchstone for him. When he felt the weight of expectation pressing down, he would recall the exhilaration of that night. He started approaching his shows with a renewed sense of playful improvisation. While he didn't abandon his set lists entirely, he would often throw in spontaneous snippets, unexpected turns, and extended jams with his band. His performances, already legendary, gained a fresh layer of vibrancy, a newfound sense of freedom. He encouraged his band to be more fluid, to take more risks. He would occasionally start a song in a different key or slow down a tempo unexpectedly just to see how they would respond. And they always did, their musical intuition sharpened by that one extraordinary night. Their bond, already strong, deepened even further, becoming a powerful, almost telepathic connection. Glen D Hardin, who had initially been mortified, became known for his lucky mistake. It became a running joke, a badge of honor. Elvis would sometimes introduce him by saying, "And on piano, the man who knows how to start a show with a real bang, even if it's the wrong one," and they would both share a laugh. The lesson for Elvis was clear. True artistry wasn't just about technical perfection. It was about connection, about spontaneity, about joy. It was about embracing the unpredictable nature of life and transforming it into something beautiful. He understood that his fans loved him not just for the hits, but for the man he was, for his humanity, for his willingness to be vulnerable and real. The heartwarming aspect of the story wasn't just that a mistake was averted. It was that something more profound was created. It taught Elvis and everyone who witnessed it that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as challenges. It reminded everyone that art is alive, constantly evolving, and that the most memorable moments are often born from the courage to deviate from the script. Years passed, and the legacy of Elvis Presley continued to grow. But among the countless tales of his charisma, his voice, his iconic performances, the story of the Medley concert stood out. It was a story of a king who, faced with an unexpected note, didn't falter, but soared, proving once again why he was, and forever would be, the king of rock and roll, and a master of the unexpected melody. It was a night when a simple wrong note led to a symphony of unforgettable moments, solidifying his place not just as a performer, but as a true spontaneous artist.